Hi there. It's so good to see y'all. My name is Miss Deborah, and we are coming to you from the Appleton Museum in Ocala, Florida. And yes, this is the third and final day of this particular camp, the painting possibilities. Real quick, I'm just going to go over the paintings that we have completed, and then we'll get started on our final painting. The first day that we started with painting possibilities, we did a tape relief painting. Very straightforward, but what's important to know about this technique is it is a technique that you can build on, that you can use tape to block out areas that you know you're going to want to come back to and perhaps want it white or a very light color. And it enables you to paint around it and then come back to it. So although this is a very simplified, fun version of it, you can build on that technique. The next painting that we did, and this was the first of our black canvases, was a nighttime birch painting. Again, what we really focused on here is some light, so that we thought about where our light source was coming from. It's a simplified version of tree trunks, but very effective in practicing where's that light coming from, and just kind of fun and different on a black canvas. All right, we talked about the artist Brito. He is a very happy, fun artist. I did complete my painting here. As I had talked about before, painting takes a while. It's generally not something you knock out too fast. It did take me a while to finish it, but I'm very pleased with the final project. The final one that we worked on, much more detailed, and certainly probably the type of painting that most people would relate to, is an impressionist style painting. Again, it took me a little while to finish. I don't know if you remember how this looked when we were done, but I came back and really built up some of the areas. What Miss Hollis is showing you right now is a time lapse of building up that painting. So I didn't paint it this fast, right? But it looks great when you go that fast. And you can see how the light is building up. I added more into the dark areas and then really focused on building up the light. As we had talked about the Impressionists, that was a big part of what they were exploring and doing that was new and different than anything that had been done before. The final touches were all of those little lily pads and those little flowers, which really add a nice visual image. All right, so we'll go ahead and get started with our painting today. We are going to kind of think about another artist that is really part of the post-impressionist movement. Probably most all of you have heard the name of Van Gogh. We are going to work a little bit in his style, but the reason that I chose that is because his style also explores some elements that we've talked about in even previous classes. If you don't have a black canvas, perfectly fine, work with what you have. One of the things that many of the artists at this time were trying to convey to the viewer is, in addition to what do we see, but other senses, such as what do you feel? Was it a windy day? And to create that illusion through movement. And today we're going to think about what we can hear. And just like the wind, where you see movement, sound also has movement in the way of sound waves. So we're going to think about how Van Gogh utilized his paint and his brushes to create movement. So I chose Starry Night, probably familiar with this. And you see here this movement that just kind of makes you think, well, maybe it's a breezy day, or maybe the clouds are floating by. We don't know exactly, but it gives an illusion that there's something going on there. And if we were to see this painting in person, there is a thickness to it. We're not going to worry so much about it actually being thick, but we'll be able to recreate the illusion of that through practicing some brush strokes. And then I'll show you quick what we're going to be working towards. So I have this gentle wavy guitar shape that I have started here. And from that, as I mentioned, thinking about another element, not just what you see, but in this case, what you hear, is I've started making these wavy, we're going to call them sound waves. And then we'll think of these kind of like maybe high notes and low notes in the music. And I'm going to try something a little bit different here. I'm going to go ahead and build up the painting to this point. And then I think I'm going to come back to this painting that I started, and I obviously didn't finish this. And that way I don't have to wait for the paint to dry. All right, I am going to go ahead and get started. So I have my canvas here, and I've put my palette over here on my right-hand side so I can readily reach my paints. And you can, I think, see a little bit better with it over here. All right, the way I got started is I went ahead, made a quick template of the shape, primarily because I knew I was going to be doing this more than one time. If you want to do that, you can do that. Certainly, if you're going to try this project again, that might be helpful. It's very straightforward to draw just a nice curvy line that fills nearly half of your canvas. It doesn't have to be exact by any means. And then we're going to come back and add the sound hole to it. I'll freehand draw the stem of the guitar. Again, I'm not concerned about it being perfect because I'm going to paint this. But often when you're starting a painting, if there's a large shape like this that you can make a template, you are able to check the size. You might find that if you're just drawing it straight on, wow, that looks a little small. If you're using a template, you can come back and redo it easily without marking up your canvas before you get started. Okay, I have just a suggestion of a neck, and correct me, I believe these are frets that go across the neck. I'm just going to put in a little illusion of that so I don't forget to put those in later. So I have a basic shape here. I'm also, as I mentioned, going to have what I'm going to think about as a couple high notes and a couple low notes. This is a good opportunity to work with an image that goes off the edge of your canvas. And then I'm going to have another bigger one right here. Now those are going to be painted in later. I think I'll go ahead and have a whole one in this area and another one that comes off the side. So these are just going to be the bright yellow spots here as they're indicated. And we'll come back and build that up with texture. Again, thinking high notes and low notes and sound. And then I'm not going to be very particular about this part, but I'm just going to, so that you can see them, I'm going to add some of these swirls of sound. These are my sound waves. Now, when I paint this, I want to kind of give a little bit of the illusion of sheet music. So if I have black lines that are still exposed from the canvas, I'm okay with that because I think some of this suggests sheet music as well. Okay, do you have something sketched out that you're happy with? I'm going to go ahead and put some paint on my palette here. I am going to work primarily in blue and yellow. I have this yellow that is really bright yellow, and I do not really want a really bright yellow guitar. So what I'm going to do is I'll put down a pretty generous amount of yellow. I don't want to run out of, it's very hard to mix the same color once you have a color mixed that you light, you want to make sure you have enough for your project. Now, I don't have brown, but I don't need brown because I have red and I have green. Now, of course, if I mixed red into the yellow, I would get orange. I'm not really going for orange. I kind of would like to have a golden color. So what I discovered works really well is if I take that red and green, because I know red and green, they're called complementary colors. They're opposite on the color wheel. And something happens when you mix those two colors together, it pretty much turns to brown. So if you don't have red and green, you could use yellow and purple work okay, and blue and orange work well. But I know this red and green makes a pretty nice kind of, I want it to be a little redder than green. So when I mix these colors together, it looks pretty darn dark on the camera there. It looks black, but it's really not black. But I am going to add a little bit more red to it. I'm going to add it off to the side so I can bring it into the color and work it up. I don't need a whole lot of this because I really am just using it to tint the yellow paint. Okay, that looks pretty good. All right, so I'm gonna get a nice big chunk of this yellow and start mixing a little bit of the brown. I had some on my brush. Okay, so my brush strokes are going to follow the shape of my guitar. When I come up to the edge here, I'm going to use the side of my brush to come up to the edge. I kind of want to avoid having a bunch of thick paint on the edge. Now, as you can see, the canvas shows through with this yellow paint, so it's probably going to take more than one coat if I want it to be solid. And since I know that my guitar is a solid wood object, I'm going to want it to be pretty solid. When I get up here to the neck of the guitar, I'm not going to paint that. I'm going to leave it black. So one thing that I'll mention about acrylic paint, when you are adding a second layer, it's important that you wait for the paint to dry before you go over it. Right here, this area, paint was wet and my brush hit it again, and it pulled up the paint. It will pull it up if you keep working over it and it's not had a chance to dry. We're going to smooth this out with a second coat, so I'm not going to be too worried about going over it until it's had a little bit of a chance to dry. I'm going around this sound hole. Okay, I mixed up a little bit more paint here because obviously I'm going to need another coat on that. I need for it to dry just a little bit before I do that. So the next thing that I'm going to think about is I'd like for this guitar to have an illusion, a little bit of depth to it on the side. So I'm just going to take a little bit of my golden paint and a little bit more brown off to the side. I need another brush because this brush is entirely too big. I'm very partial to these flat brushes that have an edge to them. It allows you to get a nice crisp edge. So I'm making a little bit darker because this is going to be on the side and the light is not hitting this area as much as the top. Okay, I do have to turn it. I'm going to start up towards the top of the guitar with just a little line coming around. Once I get a little ways towards the side, I'm going to broaden it up just a little bit. I'm using the side of the brush. so I can control how wide this is going to be. It's just to give a bit of an illusion that guitar has depth. I think what I'm going to have to do is get a little bit more here. Oh yeah, much better. And notice there, the first time that I did this, I wasn't really satisfied with that. It just really wasn't dark enough to make enough of a difference. So I just stopped and went back and worked it up again. Now, obviously here on the bottom of the canvas, the guitar sits. So I'm not going to drag this side of the guitar. We're not really, your eye can't see that, even though it still has depth. We can't see that. So I'm going to stop that line as it comes to the bottom. And now if I feel like I need to go over that again, I have enough paint here that I can do that. I think this is mostly dry enough. I'm going to go ahead and try to add another layer to it quick, and then we're going to go on to the blues. We're not particularly worried about staying in the lines, or we're just creating movement. I didn't really realize how often I want to move that canvas as I'm working around it. So our guitar here is made out of wood. So if there's some variation in the colors, I think that that's perfectly okay. It's not just plastic. It has some variation of tone in it. Yeah, some areas are not dry, so I might have to come back over that with a third coat because it's picking up the paint. On that third coat, then I can make sure to kind of smooth it out, because that's something, guitars are very highly polished, at least the ones I'm familiar with. Okay, I better leave that alone. Okay, you can see here we've got a nice area for the shadows started. I'm going to go ahead and turn this back around. I'm going to get a new brush. This brush is going to be a broader brush again. And the first color that I'm going to lay down, if you will, to put down is going to be just the blue. I want to see where I'm going with it, and to leave the areas that I'm going to come back to and make my high notes. I'm going to bring another layer right on top of this once I get it going. I'm going to take a fair amount of blue. I think I better get some more here. And I'm going to go ahead and put some white out because I know I'm going to need some. Okay, as I mentioned, right now, I'm just going to start dragging some color into this so that I have an idea of where, like here, I have a swirl. I don't want to lose that. Also, by layering the colors, we're going to create more visual interest and depth to the painting. Remember, if I have some black areas in between these colors as I keep building this up, that's fine. That's good. It's going to look a little, give a suggestion of movement, which is what we're working towards, and a little bit of a suggestion of sheet music. As you're laying down this dark blue, because I don't have to be too particular about it, it kind of gets me in the mood of this movement. I'm trying to keep my brush going just in the direction that my sound is going. So my sound is vibrating out from the guitar around. Okay, so now the next step, when I start adding white to this blue paint, now that's when some exciting things start happening. And remember, I'm using the blues. You don't have to use those colors. Use what you have. Okay, we've kind of got something started there. I'm going to separate out some of this blue and start working in a little bit of white. So the important thing that I want to remember at this point is I'm going to be building up the layers of paint. Obviously, I'm not done with this dark blue. It's not complete. I'm going to come back, add another shade of blue, and probably another lighter shade of blue. When I mix the white paint in with the blue, I want it definitely to lighten up, but in this case, I don't need for it to be totally mixed up. I'm okay if there's some elements of lighter and darker paint from where I haven't mixed it totally. Again, this isn't a flat suggesting the movement of sound. If when you're done with your painting, as you're looking at it, if you see some areas that you just think it would be beneficial to have a little bit of glitter to it, I say go for it. You know, it'll make sense in your painting. So that's probably the important thing. Some things may not lend itself to glitter, and then I would have to think seriously about adding it. Okay, I've got a pretty good start there. Again, I need to make sure that this paint dries, because if I keep going over it too much, I'm just going to start lifting the paint up. There might be some areas that I can just add a little bit more white on my brush and bring that into it, but that's just too wet. Okay, let's let that dry just a little bit here, and then we're going to come back to work on it. I think that the body of my guitar is at a place where I can go over it again. There we go. Remember, we're going to come back to these areas. I have what I'm thinking of 4 notes here, and we'll come back to that area to build those up. So it looks pretty dry here. Let's try it. I'm going to go ahead and put a little bit more yellow out, because I'm going to use yellow again for the notes, the area that I'm thinking about as notes. Okay, I'm going to mix up a little bit more of my golden color here. I got a fair amount of yellow here because, as I mentioned, I'm going to come back to that yellow. This probably is going to be a little bit different shade again. So if we're thinking that the shape could translate into other images, and we want to make sure that our audience sees a guitar, what do I need to add to it to make it more guitar-ish? Do I need to add anything? I thought that I would come back and add some lines to the neck of the guitar. Yeah, I think that some strings would add a lot to it as well. I'm thinking that, well, one, the strings are going to be like the very last thing that we'll add. And I'm thinking because the strings are so fine that a paintbrush, that's going to be pretty tough for me to control a paintbrush that fine. So I'm going to see if even a white might give me just enough of a line to create some strings on my guitar. Well, that's a little bit better. Okay, so I have some gold now that's ready here. What I want to do is come in and start building up these areas that we're thinking of high notes and low notes. One of the things that you can do with your finished project is also add some notes. If you had a black magic marker or a Sharpie rather, that would be an easy way to come back into some of your area and perhaps add some notes to it. Okay, I need a brush, I think about like this. So this is like a flat 1/2-inch size brush, and I'm going to be using shorter, heavier strokes. The flat part of the brush to get started, and then probably come back with the side of the brush. And I'm coming right up against that blue, so I want to be kind of careful because otherwise I'm going to have green coming in there. And again, I'm going to layer these. So right now I'm just getting the suggestion of them in. Yeah, there's a little bit of green. That's okay. Okay, so I'm kind of just smushing my brush a little bit just to get started on covering that area, what ultimately will be more dashing lines. But those thicker lines get me a start. What I'm going to do is trade this painting out. I've got a good start on it, but it's pretty wet. This dry painting that I can go ahead, I'm going to leave this area here. As you're working, please build that up and get your color nice and solid here. But I'm going to come back and work into these areas so that you can see how they can be built up to create more movement in the piece. So let's start like this. Okay, I think I'm going to continue with the yellow a little bit to build that up. That's where I was working previously. I need a different brush. I need to get some more paint mixed up here. So I have plenty to work with. I'm not adding any more brown to this to make it golden because I want to start elevating that yellow a little bit. I have a lot of paint on this brush, so I'm trying to get some of that paint off of there. I need a smaller flat brush. Let me scoot this up a little bit. There we go. Okay, I've added some more color and I'm lightening up that color a little bit. And as that dries, I'm going to work in the blue a little bit more. And then I'm going to come back into the yellow area and keep lightening up the layers as I'm building them up. So in the blue, let's get a little bit more white. And I'm going to start adding some shorter brush strokes, keeping with the movement on the previous brush stroke. It'll help give the illusion of there being depth and more substance to the paint itself. And I think that it also lends itself to adding more of this visual sound waves. Well, and as you remember from the beginning of the class, this is our inspiration here, is the Van Gogh Starry Night. And he captured the illusion of movement in that painting. And as I thought about movement and what could we achieve here with this guitar, of course, is sound. And sound waves, that's movement. So I'm not going to add this to absolutely every, but I'm kind of selecting where I'd like to bring those dashes, more of that texture in. So on my brush, I have a broader brush. This is a 1/2 inch brush. I'm using it directly straight up and down, and I'm using it on the side to create nice dashes. With my paint, I'm not overly concerned. I have some white coming through, but certainly I'm still blending it with the blue so that it's still blended, but there are highlights to it as well. And I think that there's definitely an advantage. I kind of enjoy being able to see my painting on the iPad screen, because it's like when you take a picture of something, you can kind of see it better than even seeing it with the naked eye there. It just somehow you can see it better. When I'm working, I often take a picture of what I'm working on so I can look at it, see it from a distance, from a little different perspective. And often, if there's something that maybe I'm just not satisfied with, I need to step away from my painting and study it to see what do I need to do differently. Okay, I just finished in this area down here. This canvas is an 11 by 14. So let's finish this area right here. I just stopped right there. That's not going to work. The music doesn't just stop like that. So we want to keep it going there. I do not listen to music when I paint. I really enjoy the quiet, and I've just never been in that habit. Some people are in the habit, they turn on their TV or they turn on the radio, and I've just never been in that habit. But I have used music to very specifically create art, maybe a different kind of music, like maybe something I don't normally listen to, like jazz, and thinking about how that jazz sound would affect the project that I'm working on. Okay, this will be just about the right timing, I think, when I finish off this side to add a little bit more to the yellow. Okay, I think the last thing I'll do here before I move on from the blue is add just a little bit more light to some of this area here. So what I've tried to think about as the sound is coming from the guitar, it's going to be at its strongest here. So I'm going to build that area up a little bit more so that it's wider, stronger, and then it fades out into just more of a soft blue. Okay, we'll come back just a little bit here and then let's get into some yellow and we'll attempt to add some strings on it. Okay, I'm just adding a little bit more texture to my nodes here. I've taken my yellow, I've added white to it. So I've got some nice highlights to come in there. Adding more texture, just adding more visual element, adding light. All right, we're going to wrap this up. Now I can always come back into this painting later and work up this part of the guitar a little bit. One of the things that I thought it needed was the frets across the neck of the guitar. We can put some of those in. And then finally, and I won't be able to do it across that fret because it is wet, but I'm thinking that some strings. Thank you everybody for coming.